Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast. Think about, the biggest, most intimidating project sitting on your desk right now.
Oh, we all have one of those.
Right, the one you are actively avoiding, the one where just figuring out how to start feels like a massive, exhausting project in itself.
Yeah, that startup friction is brutal.
Exactly. Well, what if I told you that you could guarantee meaningful progress on that exact project today by committing to just, 300 seconds of work?
I mean, it sounds almost too good to be true, right? Especially in our current hyper-accelerated business landscape.
Hmm.
Modern professionals are just drowning under the weight of these massive, nebulous deliverables. But those 300 seconds actually represent a highly calibrated approach to cognitive load management.
And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking a really comprehensive, incredibly practical article from smartkeys.org.
It's a great piece.
Yeah, it's written by Felix Römer. It is titled The Swiss Cheese Method: Tackle Big Tasks with Quick, Small Actions. And it's basically a strategic framework designed specifically to help you overcome that paralyzing startup friction and aggressively regain momentum.
It's a critical read, honestly. Because, we all know that feeling of startup paralysis. You sit down, you open your laptop, you look at the mountain of work required for some massive quarterly strategic initiative, and your brain just it short circuits.
Yeah, you end up reorganizing your digital folders or, I don't know, answering low priority email.
Exactly. Anything instead of actually moving the needle on the work that matters. Rumor's piece extracts a systemic solution to bypass that entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to visualize that massive, intimidating project as a giant, solid block of cheese. Just an impenetrable, heavy brick sitting on your desk.
Well,
Trying to consume that entire thing all at once is impossible. It is cognitively overwhelming. So instead, you take a different approach. You pick up a drill and you strategically punch tiny holes into it.
I love that visual.
Yeah, you just keep drilling these little holes until that solid, overwhelming block becomes light, airy, and entirely manageable.
It is the perfect analogy for this methodology.
Right.
And we should clarify up front, we are not discussing some cute life hack for getting through your weekend chores.
Right. This is a professional tool.
Completely. In a corporate environment, cognitive load is a massive liability. When a project is too dense, the mental energy required just to find the entry point, it drains your focus before you have even begun.
Because it's just so heavy.
Exactly. So drilling those tiny holes, executing those micro actions, it drastically lowers the barrier to entry. It basically bypasses the brain's natural resistance to heavy, complex tasks, which is an essential strategy for maintaining organizational velocity.
But how do we actually start drilling these holes without just, randomly poking around and completely losing our focus?
Well, that's where the structure comes in.
Right, because the article introduces us to the core concept, which actually has roots going all the way back to the 1970s. A time management expert named Alan Lakein coined this term instant tasks. And his rule was delightfully simple: pick actions that take 5 minutes or less.
The 5-minute constraint is the engine of the whole operation. But as Romer outlines in the text, it really only yields results if it's applied within a highly structured workflow. You aren't just scrambling to do random 5-minute chores.
Like checking Slack for 5 minutes.
Right, no. You follow a deliberate 3-step process. First, you have to define the big cheese project. And you don't just write down a vague title like launch new product.
So what do you do instead?
You write a single-sentence definition of success, and then you map out 3 to 5 key outcomes.
Ah, okay.
This ensures every single tiny hole you drill actually connects back to the core goal. You are rigidly aligning the micro with the macro.
That makes the distinction clear. So you have a blueprint, meaning you aren't just generating busy work. After you define those outcomes, what is the next step?
So step 2 is identifying those 5-minute instant tasks to break your inertia. You look at those larger outcomes and you slice them down into pieces so small that you can't possibly make an excuse not to do them.
Like what? What's an example?
Things like downloading a specific reference document or creating the title slide of a presentation. Maybe sending one quick Slack message to a colleague asking for a data file.
Things that take almost no effort.
Exactly. And then step 3 is execution, where you utilize short timers to create a sense of manufactured urgency.
Yeah, and the article actually recommends specific software setups to handle this execution phase, assuming you already use something like card-based boards. It specifically mentions Trello.
Right, Trello is great for this.
But it gets very unconventional with the setup. You don't just dump this into a massive to-do list. You set up very specific columns. There's a backlog for all your future slices, a
Yeah.
doing column, but specifically doing with the timer on for the exact task you are tackling right this second.
That timer part is key.
Yeah. And then a done today column to track immediate daily progress. And finally, a general done column. It forces everything to be intensely visual.
And that doing column, the one with the timer on, that is the linchpin there. You drag one single card into that column, start your 5-minute timer, and you are locked in.
Just that one card.
Right. It eliminates the cognitive bleed of looking at the other 50 tasks.
I am going to put on my skeptical insider hat here for a moment, though.
Court?
Wait, can a 5-minute task genuinely move the needle on a massive quarterly strategy deck for a business? It feels a bit like, I don't know, trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. How does spending 5 minutes drafting a single bullet point actually get that deck finished on time?
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychology, which is completely counterintuitive. You aren't trying to finish the quarterly strategy deck in 5 minutes.
Well, of course not.
But that is the trap we all fall into. We assume the time we allocate has to match the scale of the final product. The 5-minute task is not about completion. It is entirely about ignition.
Ignition. Okay, I understand the ignition concept, but let me challenge that from a productivity standpoint. We're constantly warned about the severe cost of context switching.
Sure.
Doesn't bouncing between all these tiny 5-minute tasks destroy our ability to do deep work? I mean, if I do 10 5-minute tasks, haven't I just fragmented my attention for an hour?
If you were bouncing between 10 unrelated projects, absolutely, that would be catastrophic for your focus. But remember, step 1. All of these tiny slices are mapped to the same big cheese.
Ah, right. The blueprint.
Yes, you aren't context switching, you are warming up the engine. Procrastination is largely an emotional regulation problem. We avoid tasks that make us feel anxious, incompetent, or just totally overwhelmed.
Yeah, that heavy feeling again.
Exactly. So by shrinking the first step down to a 5-minute window, you completely remove the anxiety.
Because anyone can endure 5 minutes of discomfort.
Precisely. And when you complete that tiny slice, even if it is just formatting the title slide, your brain gets a targeted dopamine boost. You receive a chemical reward for a micro-win.
Oh.
Yeah, you've broken the startup resistance, and that dopamine hit immediately replaces your anxiety with momentum. It becomes significantly easier to stay in the chair and seamlessly transition into a state of deep work rather than walking away from the desk entirely.
So you are essentially using neurochemistry to trick your brain into starting.
Exactly.
I see the distinction now. It is an on-ramp to deep work, not a detour away from it. But, as you drill these tiny holes, you are inevitably going to hit a tough spot.
Oh, guaranteed.
You will find a piece of the cheese that is just rock hard, a blocker. And the article pivots here to make a really brilliant observation. How you handle those blockers is the defining difference between individual task management and organizational strategy.
Yeah, this is where the text elevates from a simple productivity guide to a real leadership tool. It draws a vital contrast between the productivity tactic, which is Alan Lakein's Swiss cheese method that we just covered, and the safety framework known as James Reason's Swiss cheese model.
The names are so similar.
They sound nearly identical, but they operate in entirely different spheres.
I was really struck by this comparison in the article. I mean, I am familiar with the Swiss cheese model from reading about aviation disasters and healthcare protocols, but applying it to a personal Trello board is a very novel concept.
It is a brilliant crossover. While Lakein's method drills holes to make work manageable, James Reason's model studies how catastrophic system failures occur in complex organizations.
Right.
Reason maps out defensive layers in complex systems to explain how accidents happen. To break it down simply, imagine a hospital.
Okay.
You have layers of defense to prevent a patient from getting the wrong medication. The first layer is the doctor's prescription. The second layer is the pharmacy dispensing it. The third layer is the nurse checking the chart. The fourth layer is the barcode scanner on the wristband.
So each of those layers of defense is a slice of cheese.
Yes, and the holes in those slices represent weaknesses or flaws in that specific defense. Now, normally a flaw in one layer is caught by the next layer.
Right, the nurse catches the doctor's mistake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Reason argues that when the holes in all those different layers align perfectly, when the doctor writes it wrong, The pharmacy misses it, the nurse is distracted, and the scanner is broken.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the hazard passes straight through every layer and causes a major failure.
So in our productivity model, holes are positive, they represent progress. But in the risk management model, holes are negative, they represent systemic vulnerabilities.
That is the core distinction. And the text urges the reader to understand the types of vulnerabilities within that safety model. It specifically divides them into active failures and latent failures.
Let's break those down.
Sure. Active failures are the immediate near-the-work hiccups. They happen right at the point of action, and they change constantly. Think of a typo in a spreadsheet or a misentered setting in a software program.
Just a quick human error, frustrating in the moment, but highly visible and usually easy to correct.
Exactly. Latent failures, however, are far more insidious and dangerous. These are the hidden, persistent gaps engineered right into your process or your organization's culture.
So they're baked in.
Yeah. Let's look at reasons deeper categories. Unsafe acts are the active failures, like skipping a safety check. But why did they skip it? That leads to preconditions.
Like what?
Maybe the environment is chronically understaffed, which points to supervisory factors like management didn't adjust the schedule, which finally points to organizational influences, meaning the company slashed the hiring budget.
Oh, I see.
Those last three are all latent failures. They just sit there in the background, completely unnoticed, until an active failure triggers them, and suddenly a project completely derails.
So what does this all mean? How do we translate James Reason's human factors theory back down to your daily business life? If I am sitting at my desk looking at a stalled task on my Trello board, how does knowing about latent failures actually help me get my work done?
It fundamentally changes how you interact with your own workflow. Let's say you are drilling your 5-minute holes and you stall out. You cannot move a card to the Done Today column.
Happens all the time.
Right. A typical employee who is just managing tasks might sigh, feel guilty about their lack of focus, and drag it back to the backlog. But if you apply this risk model, you start conducting human factors analysis on your own blockers. You stop blaming yourself and start asking, did I stall out because of an active failure or a latent failure?
Give me a tangible business scenario of what that analysis looks like in practice.
Let's say you couldn't finish a 5-minute slice because the task was actually much too complex. You misjudged the scope of it. Or maybe you tried to pull data before the report was generated. That is an active failure.
So that's on me.
Right. The fix is entirely within your control. You shrink the task further, or you reorder your sequence. But consider a different scenario. You stall out because you need a VP's signature to proceed. And that VP is always traveling, has no designated proxy, and there is no clear protocol for urgent approvals. That is a latent failure.
So the blocker isn't my inability to do the task. The blocker is a flaw in the company's operational design.
Precisely. By flagging those repeat blockers on your board, you aren't just logging your daily inefficiencies. You are gathering empirical data to design upstream system-level fixes.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
It really is. You can walk into a leadership meeting and say, I am not just complaining about delays. I have the data showing that our lack of a proxy approval pipeline is a latent failure, causing a 15% bottleneck across all Q3 deliverables. We need to build a new template. It elevates you from a reactive task doer to a proactive, strategic problem solver.
That is incredibly empowering. You use micro-productivity to debug the macro organization. Here's where it gets really interesting. Now that we know how to identify the right micro tasks to build momentum, and we know how to troubleshoot the systemic blockers, how do we integrate this into our larger daily workflow?
Yeah, you have to bring it all together.
Because if you just have hundreds of 5-minute tasks floating around on a board, it seems like it would devolve into absolute chaos by Tuesday afternoon.
Oh, that is the greatest danger of micro-productivity tactics. If they exist in a vacuum, you just end up swatting at flies all day. You feel incredibly busy, but you aren't actually moving toward a meaningful goal.
Right.
This is where the article introduces the concept of the productivity stack, layering different time-tested frameworks together so they support and reinforce each other. The beauty here is that you don't have to abandon the project management tools you already know. You simply inject the Swiss cheese method into them as the execution mechanism.
The article specifically details how to stack 3 classic systems. Let's look at the first one, the Eisenhower matrix. If I have 50 tiny holes to drill, how does Eisenhower help?
The Eisenhower matrix is your triage system. It sorts your tasks along 2 axes, urgency and importance. You use this matrix purely to figure out the sequence. Which slice of the cheese do you drill first?
The most important ones, I assume.
Exactly. By prioritizing the slices that are both urgent and important, you prevent that stressful 5 o'clock panic where you realize you spent your entire day doing easy tasks while ignoring the critical ones. It dictates your sequence.
It answers what first. Then we layer in the Moscow method, MOSCOW. I know this is an acronym heavily used in agile software development, but how does it function in this stack?
Moscow stands for must have, should have, could have, and won't have. You tag your Trello cards with these labels. While Eisenhower is about sequence, Moscow is entirely about protecting your scope and your cognitive bandwidth.
Okay, so filtering tasks.
Yeah. When a deadline is looming and things get tight, you look at your board. You ensure you are exclusively drilling holes in the must tasks.
I would argue the won't have category is the most powerful part of that acronym. It gives you explicit permission to strategically ignore things. You are actively choosing to drop the won't tasks to reduce your failure points and ensure the core project survives.
That is a crucial insight. Defining what you aren't going to do is just as important as defining what you will do. Finally, the stack incorporates the Pomodoro technique and deep work, and this addresses your earlier concern about context switching.
Right. How do we blend a frenzy of 5-minute tasks with the need for long, uninterrupted focus?
They manage your actual energy expenditure. You could use standard Pomodoro intervals, typically 25 minutes of work followed by a 5-minute break, to contain a rapid-fire series of instant tasks. You clear out a cluster of small admin slices.
Makes sense.
But crucially, you also reserve longer 90-minute deep work blocks for the highly complex segments of the project. You use the quick 5-minute instant task to transition into those deep blocks, warming up your focus, or to knock out the peripheral admin work beforehand. This ensures your deep work time is purely dedicated to the heavy cognitive lifting.
It acts like a perfectly calibrated machine. There is a quote from the text that perfectly encapsulates this entire section. It says, Eisenhower for what first, Moscow for what matters, Pomodoro for work now. That really is the golden rule of the productivity stack right there.
It is a phenomenal summary. You have a system for sequencing, a system for scoping, and a system for executing. And those tiny Swiss cheese microtasks are the fuel running through the entire engine.
As we start to wrap up this deep dive, I want to ensure we leave you with a highly practical takeaway. What does the implementation of all this actually look like at the end of a busy Tuesday? How do we close the loop so we don't wake up Wednesday morning right back in a state of overwhelm?
Felix Römer provides a very specific day-in-the-life closing routine, and its brilliance lies in its brevity. You end your day with a 2-minute review. Just 2 minutes. You look at your board, and you archive your completed slices. This step is vital. You must clear the visual clutter so you can actually perceive your progress. Then, you measure your performance for the day by the number of slices you completed, not by the hours you sat staring at your screen.
Let's pause on that because that is a massive paradigm shift. Judging your day by execution, not exhaustion. We have all had those days where we sit at a desk for 8 grueling hours, agonizing over a massive project, answering random emails, and we log off feeling completely drained but having achieved essentially nothing.
Yes, the exhaustion metric is a false idol. Contrasted with a day where you might only work for 4 hours, but you systematically drilled 20 critical, prioritized holes into your project. You end the day energized and with tangible progress.
Execution over exhaustion. And what is the final step of that 2-minute review?
You schedule tomorrow's starting slice. You decide, right then and there before you log off, what the very first 5-minute task will be the next morning. You put it in the doing column.
So it's waiting for you.
Exactly. So when you sit down with your coffee tomorrow, there is zero friction. No deciding what to do, no checking emails to warm up. You just start the timer. The ultimate goal here is to make progress a reliable systemic habit, not just a daily hope.
I love that. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this raises an important question for anyone listening today. We have spent a lot of time discussing how to manage our own individual projects and productivity stacks. But what if we zoom out?
Okay, zooming out.
If we look at your entire team or your entire organization as one massive block of Swiss cheese, are the holes you and your colleagues are drilling every day intentionally aligned and leading you toward a shared definition of success? Or are you all collectively ignoring those unmanaged latent failures? The poor software designs, the unclear communications, the bottlenecked approvals that are slowly, silently aligning in the background, just waiting to cause a major systemic accident.
Wow. That is a heavy but absolutely essential question to ask as a professional. Are we just staying busy, or are we actively building a resilient, forward-thinking system? I want to say a huge thank you to everyone for tuning in to the Smart Keys podcast today. We highly encourage you to go read Felix Römer's full article, The Swiss Cheese Method.
Yes, absolutely. Check it out.
He has some incredible visual templates for the Trello boards and those daily reviews we discussed, and you can really explore these concepts in much greater detail.
It is highly recommended reading for any professional looking to optimize their workflow and reduce cognitive drag.
You can find the link to the full smartkeys.org article right in the show notes below. And while you're there, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an insight from our deep dives. Remember, the next time a massive high-stakes project lands on your desk and it feels like an impenetrable, solid block of cheese, don't let the cognitive load paralyze you. Don't try to swallow it whole. Just pick up your drill, set a 5-minute timer, and punch that very first tiny hole. You will be amazed at how quickly the mountain crumbles.